Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Let's start. Hi guys, my name's Connor. I can't do an intro right now. Original link to the video, top of the description, right below that, link to the Discord. My name's Connor if you're new. I like to watch things and do stuff. Hope you're all having an okay day. I'm having some trouble right now. Let's go. Yeah, if you are not ready to learn, there's the door. Home ec's down the hall. You're in the wrong class. Preemptive like, Armchair Historian is an amazing channel. Highly recommend. Okay. I'm ready.
Check out our new Evolution of French Uniforms poster over at store.armchairhistory.tv.
Their store, their link, all their links.
If you've ever had to delve into the murky world of personal finance, you may have noticed just how difficult, dangerous, and awkward it can be to establish a proper credit score. Many Americans are understandably hesitant to take on credit card debt when they're young and newly independent, but that often leaves them locked out of loans and other financial benefits when they get older. Luckily, the sponsor of today's video, Extra, is a debit card that lets you build credit and earn rewards just like a credit card, but without putting your financial future at risk. How it works is simple. Users connect Extra to their existing bank account, Extra spots them for day-to-day purchases, and auto-pays themselves back the next business day. Then, at the end of the month, Extra reports your payments to credit bureaus. It's simple, straightforward, and doesn't carry the downsides of interest, credit checks, or late payment fees. Help secure your financial future and start building credit today with an Extra debit card by visiting extra.app/armchairhistorian or signing up via the link in the description below.
Guys, click the links, helps out Armchair Historian.
The 1600s saw a slow but steady transformation of the French army from an ad hoc collection of private levies and mercenary companies into a standing professional force who swore loyalty directly to the king. In 1671, Louis XIV issued a royal ordinance that resulted in the creation of a standardized uniform for the army left by his predecessor, Louis XIII. After 1684, this consisted of a black tricorn or bicorn hat and gray-white coat with colored linings.
Blue and red colors were reserved for the king's military household.
13th bicorn or bicorn hat and gray-white coat with colored linings to indicate specific units and ranks. The French infantry also made extensive use of the fusil, a light flintlock musket. This led to them being known as Fusiliers, a name which stuck decades after the weapon was retired from use. Colonial French line infantry during the French and Indian War wore gray-white woolen breeches, stockings, and overcoats. Units were identified by the color of their waistcoats, while tricorn hats were most common. Many soldiers carried small hatchets similar to native tomahawks, as these were of much more practical use than swords.
Question. The hat, first of all, it was really cool how they adopted tomahawks fighting in North America. So the hats, those famous kind of colonial black hats, do they serve any other purpose other than to keep the sun out of your eyes, I wonder? And I'm curious to see when, your standard protective helmet becomes a part of your uniform, your gear.
Swords.
Sorry.
High-ranking officers in the French and Indian War had typically gaudy uniforms with extensive gold braiding and plumed, wide-brimmed chapeau hats in various styles. Unlike their lower ranks, they still wore and used swords, as these were symbols of the gentry. Just prior to the start of the French Revolution, the French soldier wore a white turn-back coat fastened by lapels, alongside breeches and stockings. Equipment was often worn by belts around the waist or slung from the shoulder. An important and hated feature was the high stock worn around the neck, designed to keep the head forcibly erect.
Really?
As stability returned,
the white thing, the sash thing.
returned to the French army, so did standardized uniforms. Many features from the pre-revolutionary period were kept, but white coats were exchanged for blue. In 1801, a new military cap called the shako was introduced for light regiments, then implemented for all line regiments in 1807. Standard equipment included a curved saber, 65 centimeters or 25.5 inches long for elite companies, and a 128 centimeter or 4 foot 2 inch 17.1 millimeter caliber musket. The short and agile skirmishers of Napoleon's army were known as voltigeurs, or
caliber is the... I should have read the comment. Caliber is the size of the barrel.
And agile skirmishers of Napoleon's army were known as voltigeurs, or vaulters, and commonly wore green and yellow epaulets to distinguish them from the regular fusiliers. Among the French grenadiers, none were more senior nor more distinguished than the Old Guard, which formed the heart of Napoleon's army during his conquest of Europe.
I hear that's a big reason around the
beautifully
short
ornate bearskin caps with brass plates stamped with the imperial eagle, adorned with white cords.
I heard that Napoleon would always be around this special guard troops, and they'd always be kind of the taller individuals, and so that just made him seem even shorter since he was always hanging around them.
The Old Guard wore beautifully ornate bearskin caps with brass plates stamped with the imperial eagle, adorned with white cords, red plumes, and a red patch bearing a golden grenade. Their turnback coats bore an additional pair of gold grenades, in contrast to the red grenades worn by the regular grenadiers. As the Bourbon dynasty expanded the empire overseas, they began recruiting heavily from local populations. Among these were the Zouaves. Initially imported from North Africa, but eventually recruited from all over Europe. Wearing open-fronted
recruitment of Zouaves restricted to Europe between 1842 and 1942.
Blue jackets, Sheshia headdresses, and thick baggy trousers, the Zouaves were superb light infantry and earned decoration after decoration in French service. In 1831, King Louis Philippe established the French Foreign Legion, one of the most famous and long-lasting military units in history. Initially stationed in Algeria, the Foreign Legion was, as its name implied, intended to be made mainly of foreign recruits. Legionnaires who participated in the Second French Intervention in Mexico used the Model 1859 carbine and often adopted Zouave-style braided jackets and fezes to help cope with the heat. By the time of the Franco-Prussian War, line infantry had replaced the shako with the much simpler kepi, colored a bright red with blue branding and black peak. The standard uniform was also blue, with trousers dyed madder red. Obsolete musket technology was also replaced by the chassepot bolt-action breech-loading rifle that was among the best infantry weapons of the era.
That's huge.
Despite their defeat at the hands of the North German Confederation in 1871, the French maintained a powerful colonial empire. While working to establish a French protectorate in Vietnam, the French Marine Infantry of the Tonkin Expeditionary Corps wore the M78 colonial helmet and white trousers with a black belt and 2 pouches.
Vietnam.
Half a century later, the soldiers of the French Third Republic marched into battle still wearing their highly recognizable blue and red uniforms and equipped with the M93 Lebel rifle, the first standard infantry rifle to use smokeless powder. Unfortunately, the weapon was also excessively long for trench warfare, while the bright blue French coats made them easy targets for enemy fire. Likewise, French officers were easily identified by enemy snipers thanks to the gold trim on their kepis and gold lacework decorating their coats. After their baptism by fire, the French quickly dispensed with their bright red trousers and introduced new horizon blue overcoats.
It's kind of sad in a way to see the pomp and circumstances around wars kind of wane, where it's with greater military technology, the game plan for wars is just completely changed, and there's not these massive marching armies across battlefields to meet each other, and in a way that's kind of sad that that the theater of war got, you know what I mean.
They were also the first major power to issue steel helmets, beginning with the M15 Adrian helmet in 1915. French soldiers frequently copied the British puttees, or cloth wrappings around the ankles and lower legs, to help deal with the perpetual mud and blood of the trenches. As with many nations, the French Air Force began as just another branch of the army. Formed in October of 1910, it was a pioneering force in early aircraft design. French pilots wore blue uniforms like their army counterparts, but donned extremely thick wool-lined overcoats and padded leather hats and goggles before climbing into the open-air cockpits of early fighter aircraft. By the start of the Second World War, the French had done away with the blue uniforms entirely and replaced them with khaki.
I almost want to look up how temperature decreases with like at 1,000 feet. How much colder is it up there? You know what I mean?
Infantry now wore a modernized version of the Adrian helmet known as the M26. After their defeat at the hands of the Axis, the new Vichy French government were allowed to keep a small army that was equipped with a mix of standard French gear from 1940 and German cast-offs, such as various pre-war models of the iconic German Stahlhelm. The Free French were a lot less lucky and were forced to rely almost completely on the British for supplies, resulting in uniforms more or less identical to those of their allies. To distinguish themselves from their Anglo-Saxon comrades, most Free French wore lapel badges with various symbols of liberty.
What did it say about Vichy France?
Equipped with a mix of standard. After their defeat at the hands of the Axis, the new Vichy French government were allowed to keep a small army that was equipped with a mix of standard French gear from 1940 and German cast-offs, such as various pre-war models of the iconic German Stahlhelm.
Interesting.
Free French wore lapel badges with various symbols of liberty, such as the Cross of Lorraine. British influence on French uniform designs did not end with the Second World War. During the Indochina campaign, the Foreign Legion wore French M47 uniforms and bush hats with British webbing. The standard rifle remained the World War II-era bolt-action MAS 36, but was extensively supplemented by a motley collection of French, British, and American weapons. During the Algerian War, Colonial French infantry commonly wore the MLE 4756 lizard camo pattern uniform with lightweight shoes called patougas, made from canvas or rubber. In 1978, the French armed forces adopted the FAMAS F1 assault rifle, a French-built competitor to similar weapons like the M16 and FN FAL. They were also issued Model 1978 helmet to replace older models dating as far back as 1951.
I hear the M16 was I was listening to a Vietnam War vet of who he was there with the transition from I think it was the M15 to the M16, whereas the M15 was just so much more reliable and you could throw it in mud, it still work, whereas the M16 would get clogged and jammed all the time.
Infantry uniforms remained a mixture of olive drab and khaki. To compete with similar units like the British SAS and German GSG-9, the French created the GIGN, or National Gendarmerie
Hold on. I have another question, a bigger question. When it came to Vichy France, were they, heads of it, any French people who were kind of considered as traitors to people in the French resistance, or was it just, they were clearly conquered by the Germans and you're going to be a puppet government whether you like it or not? My question isn't was it voluntary? Was it voluntary? My question is, were there any French people taking advantage of Vichy France for German reasons? Does that make sense?
And German cast-off. The Free French were a lot less lucky and were forced to rely almost completely on the British for supplies, resulting in uniforms more or less identical to those of their allies. To distinguish themselves from their Anglo-Saxon comrades, most Free French wore lapel badges with various symbols of liberty, such as the Cross of Lorraine. British influence on French uniform designs did not end with the Second World War. During the Indochina campaign, the Foreign Legion wore French M47 uniforms and bush hats with British webbing. The standard rifle remained the World War II-era bolt-action MAS 36, but was extensively supplemented by a motley collection of French, British, and American weapons.
It's a really cool-looking gun.
During the Algerian War, Colonial French infantry commonly wore the MLE 4756 lizard camo pattern uniform with lightweight shoes called patougas, made from canvas or rubber. In 1978, the French armed forces adopted the FAMAS F1 assault rifle, a French-built competitor to similar weapons like the M16 and FN FAL. They were also issued Model 1978 helmet to replace older models dating as far back as 1951. Infantry uniforms remained a mixture of olive drab and khaki. To compete with similar units like the British SAS and German GSG-9, the French created the GIGN, or National Gendarmerie Intervention Group, in 1974. As an elite special forces unit, the GIGN are equipped with cutting-edge technology, and their assault teams usually wear dark blue uniforms with numerous tactical pouches and bullet-resistant inserts. In non-combat situations, they also can be seen wearing the dark blue beret of the National Gendarmerie. During the War on Terror, French troops began a campaign against the insurgency in the Maghreb region of Africa. At this time, infantry were equipped with the FALA system, which included a modified FAMAS with a telescopic night sight and a Spectra helmet outfitted with light amplification goggles and various other electronics. The uniform featured both hard ballistic plates rated against rifle caliber ammunition and soft protection against small arms fire and shrapnel. Although founded by Napoleon, the Saint-Cyr Special Military Academy still serves as the French equivalent of Sandhurst Academy or West Point. Officers attending ceremonial functions wear an ornate dark blue uniform with red epaulets and red or gold shoulder boards depending on rank. Headwear consists of a pale blue shako cap with a prominent red and white plume.
Great video. Armchair Historian always has amazing videos, great animation and score, great narrator. Awesome. I'm going to do the English one as well, and there's the American one, but I'm not sure my European audience would want to see me react to an American uniform one, so I'll have those coming out soon. I love the video. I'd love to see you guys' answers to some of my questions, especially the Vichy France one. I wasn't exactly sure if I worded it right, but it's just... Were there, you know what I mean? Like, were there French people who were French and kind of thought like, well, this is it, and just like sided 100% with the Germans? I guess is my question. Or if it was all just, you know, clearly hostage type situation, and you got to do what you got to do to survive. See you guys next time.